So today, it's 2025 when you were watching this. Is that the right year? Nope. 2026. But we're going to talk about what happened in 2022. So last year in 2025, I started talking about and revisiting like old book hauls, talking about what I actually read in a particular month and that kind of thing. And I'm going to keep doing that in 2026, but I'm changing it up a little bit. But let's start where I started before. So I'm going to put to the side of me here a quick review of what I happened to read in the month of January in 2022, because that rarely, basically never, lines up with what I actually hauled during that month. I haven't looked at it yet. Now that I'm thinking about it, so let me know. What does it look like? Was it a good mix of books? Was it like 2 books? Did I read nothing? I don't know. Anyway, 2022 was the year that I started using the story graph like fairly regularly and logging my books and that kind of thing. Now, one of the catches with saying these are the books that I hauled during that month is that the way that the story graph tracks it is it tracks when you added saying you wanted to read a book, not when you said you like actually owned and bought the book. So that accurate data isn't going to come until sometime in like 2024 for me when I started like tracking my book hauls separately. That's not important for this video, however. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about all the books that I hauled in the month of January in 2022, those that I finished, unhauled, that kind of thing, what happened to them really quickly, and then we're going to talk about the ones that I have left. Because what I've decided is that while most people do like, these books will self-destruct in 2026, I'm going to kind of do that, but I'm going to do mine differently. I'm not going to create a TBR at the beginning of the year because that's just going to make books that I have to like keep track of as the year goes, and I actually hate doing that is what I've discovered. So I'm going to do it month by month. Each month, not only am I going to revisit 2022, but I'm also going to create a stack of books that are going to self-destruct by the end of this year. And in addition to that, I'm going to immediately attempt to read at least one of them, because for each of these stacks that I potentially create, I'm going to do my favorite finish or diminish, which is a type of reader unhaul. Except mine is like keep reading until you finally find a book that you want to finish. The last time I did this, which was only one time, I ended up with a 5-star read. So it's hopefully going to make me hyped about these books, but we'll see. Either way, let's start with the books. There are 13. My list is over here. Let me grab it. Got it. Okay. I also started last year like a little book collection book. Isn't it pretty? I love this notebook. It's a composition notebook, in case you were wondering. Anyway, 2022, January. Let's go back. I hauled 13 books. We're going to talk about each of them just in the random order I wrote them down on this page. That was the book that I hauled and read, Doomsday Book. Let me get the books. This is a book channel. Take number 2, The Doomsday Book by Connie Willis. I hauled it in 2022, but I must not have read it until at least 2023 because I'm pretty sure there's a book review on my channel of this book. Anyway, that one's read. We'll just put it there for now. The next book that I hauled is Strange the Dreamer. I did read that. It was one of the first buddy reads that I did with my friend Alex, I think, right? Is that right, Alex? Let me know. And I've unhauled that. It was good. We read both books in that duology, and we enjoyed the buddy reading experience, probably more than the book, but the book wasn't bad. I also read another fantasy because I was still definitely like hard into my buying fantasy and reading fantasy era. And the next book was The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. Also really enjoyed it. I can definitely see why people enjoy her writing. I've now read Babel by R.F. Kuang as well, and I'm good. I owned and hauled The Priory of the Orange Tree. I have since attempted to read it, and while again I can see why people really enjoy this book, the writing is really good. In fact, I liked the writing in that better than in The Poppy War. I ended up DNFing it because I realized I just really didn't care. It is high fantasy that is centered around like court politics, which is also my least favorite like trope in fantasy. So knowing my own taste, I just knew that it wasn't worth trying to continue. Did I read that earlier this year? I think I did. Number 5 was The Eye of the World. I did read this as part of like a group of people here on BookTube who we were all reading it and starting it together. I got on that hype train. I had hauled it in 2022. I read it last year, I think, in 2020, nope, 2 years ago, 2024. And like, I was one and done. It was good. Okay, fine. I get it. Moving on. I hauled Women Talking in 2022 and only just read it in the fall of 2025. So if you're kind of getting a theme, I like my books to sit and marinate a bit. I did haul Tigana in 2022, and I should mention, other than the Doomsday book, the reason I'm not showing you all the rest of these books is because I've unhauled all of them. Tigana, however, is the first book that I'm going to mention that I unhauled unread. Again, I realized that this book was high fantasy, and I was able to, 3 years out, read the description of it and realize that it wasn't a book that I would actually enjoy at this point. I may have enjoyed it at the time that I bought it, but maybe not. Because when I'm looking at the ones that I did read, and some of them I did read earlier, probably not, to be honest. Though I've heard it's a really good book, just because I'm unhauling them doesn't mean that you won't like them. Okay, now we come to one book that I still own, and that is The Weight of Ink. Okay, here it is, The Weight of Ink. This is a historical fiction that also has time travel, I think. Oh, it also doesn't have a description of what... Oh, okay, here it is. It's on the French flap. Okay, so this book is set in the 1660s and the early 2000s, and it discusses two women, two different time periods, same place, both trying to live out similar issues in their life. And now that I'm saying that out loud, it actually reminds me of two other books that I own. One is it called Cautery? I'll put it up on the screen. And the other one is by A.S. Byatt, Possession, where they both have like people kind of researching or doing different things in two different time periods with similar lives and or loves. I might have to start a book project with that. Either way, this is going to be the first book that's on the self-destruct list. So I'm just going to pop that right there for you to see. And yeah, I've wanted to read this book since 2022. I'm pretty sure I added it to the Storygraph then because I did actually haul it then. So it has been a full-on 4 years. Wow, I can do the math. And I still haven't read this book. I want to change that. But will that be the first book that I start with? I don't know. Let me tell you about the other books on this list. The next one is the Satanic Verses, and I do still own this. Here it is, Satanic Verses, the Satanic Verses. This has been banned. The author has been almost unalived, and I have heard a lot of controversial things about this book. I want to look into it further. There are multiple books by Salman Rushdie that I would like to read. I don't know that this is the one that I want to start with, and I don't actually know if I'm going to enjoy his books. He's very lyrical. He does include a lot of magical realism and things that I could like or that I could really not like. So we'll see how that goes, but that's going to be the second book on this month's self-destruct list, because I've not read either of these in the 4 years that I've owned them. Though this, again, is definitely one that I feel like I added and said I wanted to read back in 2022, but I swear I purchased it much more recently than that. So, confusing. But either way, who cares? I've wanted to read these for at least 4 years. That I know for sure is true. Okay, next on the list is The Promise by Damon Galgut. I just read that earlier this year. No, we're in 2026 when you're watching this. I read this, I think, at the beginning of 2025. 2025, I swear, was the longest year ever, but went by really fast. Tell me how time works. Someone, please. Okay, The Promise. This book, 2022. I know I hauled it then, if not earlier. It was at one point on most anticipated books list. It might have been on most anticipated for last year or the year before. I really wanted to read this. I had hyped it up to myself. I didn't like it. It was unhauled, as was Palmares, which is book number 11 off this list. I did not read it. I ended up finding out that there was a lot of controversy surrounding the writing of the book and just issues. There were issues. There's lots of issues. And I didn't want to get into those. I wasn't that invested in the book. I decided that if I was going to spend my time reading a chunky book that was talking about historical slavery in Brazil, that I'd want to read something that was known to be more accurate. And so I didn't want to spend my time on that book. I unhauled it unread. So that's only 2 books off this list that were unhauled that I didn't read at all. I did read the next book on this list, which is Pachinko. I feel like I still have that. Do I? I do not. And that doesn't shock me. I read it. I liked the beginning more than I liked it towards the end. And I've heard a lot of people say that. And it was just okay for me. It wasn't horrible, but it was definitely a bit of a letdown. And so I did read it in its entirety and then I did unhaul it. And I have one last book, book number 13. Is that ominous? It's Hopscotch. Let me go get it because it's actually on my current TBR at the time that I'm filming this. Okay, Hopscotch. So this is a book that's on all sorts of TBRs for me right now. It was on my TBR for December, like the one that I did in December. It's on my TBR for the World game that I've been playing with my channel members. It's been on past TBRs. It fills a lot of voids in my reading plan life, if you will, and I've yet to read it. And I'm pretty sure I've also owned this one since 2022, so this is also on the self-destruct list. So the idea is that if I don't read these books by the end of this year, that I'm going to seriously consider unhauling them. I know that seems really weak because a lot of people are like, they're out of my life, I'm unhauling them. But I think I'm going to end it with one big bang in December where I try a chapter of each of them before unhauling them. So the more I read these over the course of the year, the fewer books I will have to do that with in December, because otherwise all of December's TBR may just be a read or unhaul. And I don't know that I want the year to go out like that. So here we are. I guess I'm going to start with Hopscotch just because it's on a TBR. In fact, I may have already finished this by the time you see this, but I haven't started reading it yet. So you're still going to come along with me on the adventure. Wow, this filming ahead of schedule is getting super meta and weird. I feel like I'm time traveling. Okay. Wow, I have something in my eye now. Okay, we're going to move on. So if you want to know the timing of how this is all working, so long as you see a bow in my hair in one of these videos, I'm filming it in December and you're watching it whenever it's coming out. All right, Hopscotch, I'm going to start with this one. The goal is to read this and finish it. I am going to allow myself to DNF it, but if I DNF it, it's an unhaul. It cannot be reshelved. And after that, I then still need to move on to one of these other books if I haven't finished this one. And so it may end up being that I try all three of these books and unhaul them all, or it may be that, I try this one and that's it, and these just are going to be shelved as a reminder that I still need to read them, or they're going to self-destruct, and I will be keeping track of this list. So these are the selections for January. Let me take you to whenever I start reading this book. Hopefully I don't forget to do that, because I'm horrible at vlogging. Like I said, I decided to start with Hopscotch, finally sitting down to do it. And by the way, blast from the past, it's still pre-Christmas for me, even though you're not going to be seeing this until January. That's just how filming works. It's too postmodern. It's stream of consciousness. Which at the time that I bought this ages ago, if I had have looked it up, if I had have read the first few pages, I would have known that. My intent was to sit down for 15 minutes with this and give it a try and then go run my errands. I don't need to sit with this for 15 minutes to just know that this just is not a Nicole book. This is not something that I'm going to enjoy. It's something that I would work through and feel accomplished for making it, but I'm just not always a fan of stream of consciousness. I don't want to say never because I have read some books and do enjoy them, but there's a part of this that just has the sentences that just go and go and go and go for a while, and it's just saying all sorts of things, and my mind doesn't work that way and ceases to enjoy it, and it's just not worth it to me. I've had this book a long time. It's time to let it go. Now I need to go and look up and see what the other choices were. The Weight of Ink, Satanic Verses. Does that sound right? It's been a couple weeks since I filmed the first part of this video, but I wrote down the list, so let me go check it out. Okay, I'm pretty sure I put it in my notebook. And I did. Okay, so yeah, I was right. The Weight of Ink and the Satanic Verses. Now, I know Salman Rushdie also has a very postmodern writing style, so I'm going to go for the Weight of Ink in the hopes of ending this video. Or should I go with the Satanic Verses? Because knowing that I only that it's not a writing style that I might like, it may just help me get another book off my shelf instead of having it sit there forever. Let me do that. Let me go grab that book. I'm going to sit with that for 15 minutes and we'll see what happens. What if I end up unhauling all three of these? Okay, I got the Satanic Verses. Here we go. Let's give it a try. And I do feel like I need to apologize for those of you who are excited for me to read Hopscotch and tell you about it. I was excited to read Hopscotch and tell you about it. But I also realized that I'm not one of those booktubers who is going to read a book from start to finish that I don't enjoy just to read it and be able to tell you about it, because I know what's going to happen. I'm just going to end up skimming the book and not actually reading it and not enjoying it and end up in a reading slump and all of those things. And who wants that? I certainly don't want it, even if it's just for the sake of content, because I don't read for the sake of content. So, okay, here we go. Try again. I'll see you in 15 minutes. Okay, same thing. Like I thought. I guess it's good that I made that decision. So if you like postmodern writing and stream of consciousness and that type of thing, these are definitely two books to give a try. I know myself, and I know my reading taste, and I know that this isn't going to happen. Uh, when I bought this book, I don't think I knew myself that well, and didn't know this book well enough to know that that might be an issue. With this one, I did know that it would be an issue. So why did I buy it? Why do we do that to ourselves? I don't know. Okay, way to think. Let's see how that goes. And you know what? If you don't like DNFing, if you feel like you need to start a book and finish it in its entirety, good on you. That's not me. Everybody do their own thing. Okay, the way to think. Am I feeling skeptical at this point? Yes, but I think this one should be fine. Though I also feel like this is the book that I think I said was gonna kind of do a if you give a mouse a cookie kind of project to me, because there's two other books that I own that have a similar thing. One is The Possession and the other one is Cowdery. So we'll see if that happens. We'll see. I gotta start and finish this book first before I think about reading other books. Also wrote a book called Tolstoy Lied, a love story. Sounds promising. Here we go. Let's see if I can get 15 minutes of this read. The other two lasted about 3, if that. We go. The weight of ink. Gonna keep going. The plan is that I am going to keep reading this until I finish it, or I'm also going to DNF this, and if I DNF it, like the other two, I am going to end up unhauling it. I think what I will probably do is check in with you probably first once I've gotten just a little bit further into the beginning of the book. I'll probably check in about halfway through, and if I finish, I'll check in with you at the end. Otherwise, I'll check in with you when I decide to DNF it, but I don't think that's going to happen. It's a good long book, but it's not too long. It's 560 some odd pages, and hopefully this will be the one. And I'm hoping for a really good read, and that this will turn out to be a book that maybe I even regret having let sit on my shelves for so long. I am curious, and I will probably continue vlogging and just do a couple of quick check-ins with this before I end the rest of this video. And I don't know, given the start of this video, whether or not I will do the final review of this book in here or if I will do that separately, but you'll know once that happens. Anyway, I guess you'll keep watching and find out what happens with this one, and in the meantime, these two are going to go on my unhaul stack. Okay, I'm back from an afternoon of running around, and I wanted to do my first of what will probably be at least 2 or 3 check-ins and talk to you some more about The Weight of Ink. Now, I'm thinking about it and I haven't moved my bookmark and I left my phone somewhere. And the reason that's important is I realized because I had so many errands to do today and I really wanted to get a good start in this book and know more about what it's about, I ended up picking up the audiobook of it. And I'm really glad that I did that. I do like having an audiobook going on in the background, and this is definitely the type of story that lends itself well to an audiobook. It's just there's a lot going on. There's a couple of different points of view and people, and it's just a really interesting story with enough little details that it makes you, keep listening closely to it. So there were even times where like I stopped the audiobook because I needed to look at something or focus on something else and I didn't want to miss a word of what was happening. So let me explain a little bit more about the setup of the story. I'm not going to give any like major plot spoilers or anything like that. I'm just going to tell you what has happened and how the book has been set up and what the problems are going to be in a general sort of way. So I think I mentioned at the start that the protagonist of the story is Helen Watt, or at least she's one of the main characters in the book. And I'll talk about in a moment why I say it in that way. So anyway, Helen Watt, she is a professor in a history department at a university, and she's definitely towards the end of her career. And she's had a pretty good career, but it has definitely been a challenging one because she is a female professor working in a male predominant field. No shock there. And she has recently, like I said, been contacted by this family who has found some papers in the wall that may actually end up being connected to her work and may have her end her career on a major high based on this discovery. However, because she is aging and is having some health problems of her own, she realizes that she really can't go at this alone. And so she finds herself in a situation where she is forced to take on a younger American postgraduate or graduate student who is kind of floundering in his own attempts to finish his dissertation on a somewhat obscure and unlikely theme. So they're both at points in their career where they're kind of struggling. You have 2 different generations. You have Helen, you have Aaron Levi. Helen is not Jewish, Aaron is, which is definitely coming up because the papers that they are finding are from a English Jewish society. You get a lot of information about the history of European Jewish communities, particularly in England and London, as well as in the Netherlands and in Spain. And really the issue that these two are facing is, a lot. They're up against a lot of different obstacles at the beginning of this book, including simple things like whether the family whose household they have found the papers in are willing to sort of put off their own renovation plans for the sake of history, whether they are going to be able to work well together as a team to get through this work. They're also up against time. They have 3 days to look over these papers to figure out whether they're significant enough to convince their university to buy them. I don't know how long a period of time this book is going to cover. I'm guessing beyond those 3 days, but right now I'm still in the middle of those 3 days. And there's a lot that's happening, in between them and around them. The book is told both from Helen's perspective as well as occasionally from Aaron's perspective. And then you get the time jump where you're also getting a bit of what is going on back in the 1600s when the papers that they found were originally being written. You have multiple perspectives it's being told from. There are multiple ways that it's being told. You're reading emails at times, you're reading letters, you get bits and snippets of ledgers. I mean, I wouldn't say it's completely ergodic fiction in terms of like the font or anything on the page changing. I say that even though I've been listening to the audiobook. But you do get a different idea of the different ways that people are communicating. So I feel like this book is going to be a lot about communication, a lot about the history of Jewish people in Western Europe during both time periods in a lot of ways. I've already learned a lot about that history. And while it like bordered on the line at one point of just being a major info dump, I kind of didn't mind it because I was really fascinated by the info. And then you also get an idea of where the name of the title is coming from, which has to do with the obstacle that they're up against in terms of time, just in terms of the material they're looking at even being legible anymore. Because, of course, the paper and the ink have sat over a long period of time, and they're sort of fighting the aging of that and whether or not it's going to hold together long enough for them to make these discoveries. And I feel like that's also sort of symbolic of what's going on with Helen herself. So I'm really enjoying this. I'm really enjoying the audiobook, though I think I do want to read it physically as much as possible because there's just like certain details that I feel like are important to follow to completely understand the story. Is this going to be a 5-star? Am I going to predict that this early on? I don't think so, but I think it's going to be a very strong 4-star read. And because I'm probably going to be going back and forth between the physical and audiobook edition of this, just because the busyness of the time of year, I wouldn't be surprised if I end up holding on to this book so that I can completely reread it at some point in its physical form. All right, let me look up and tell you exactly how far I'm at this point. Um, let's see, after running around and doing all my errands, I'm 15% of the way into the book. So maybe what I'll do is come back when I'm maybe at the halfway mark, and then come back again when I'm at like the climax of the story. And then my final thoughts you'll get when I do my final book review, unless I decide to throw them in this video. But I don't know if I'm going to do that yet because it's all just going to depend on how long this whole video ends up being. But that's my check-in for now, and I'm enjoying it and looking forward to getting back to it. I have a couple other things I need to do tonight, but like I said, I think I'm down here on the floor because I'm about to start wrapping some presents, so I'm definitely going to be listening to this while I do that. And yeah, I'll check back with you later. So while I'm sitting here working on filming another video, I thought it would be a good time to check in real quickly on the weight of ink. Now, my bookmark is not in the correct place. I'll have to figure that out. I've been mostly continuing to listen to it on audiobook, and I just wanted to check in because I'm realizing that I'm at a point where I'm like, what else is going to happen in this book? Do you have those moments in books where you feel like things have reached a climax and should be wrapping up and coming to an end, and then you're like, wait, they're not? So basically what's happening at this point is there are a lot of things in the story that I feel like are being resolved. A lot of like mysteries, if you will, are being solved and that kind of thing. And yet last night when I was looking on my audiobook, I'm like, oh, I might finish this tonight. I've only got a little bit of time left. Da 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 da. And then I was like, not quite. I'm only 80% of the way through the book. I still have 3 hours of this book left. I can't imagine what's going to happen in 3 hours. I feel like, in terms of this book, I should have like 10 to 15 minutes left and maybe like 20 pages of it left. I'm really confused at this point about what could possibly continue to happen for the next 20% of the book. And there are still a few things that could go on, but I feel like if a lot more was resolved, it would feel like trying to put a bow on everything. I don't know if that makes sense. We'll see if I still feel like that when it comes to the end. But like, I was just so confused by that I thought I'd check in and just say that real quickly. This is the point where I feel like the book is maybe a bit too long and a bit overwritten, but I could change my mind by the end, so we'll see. I have 20% of the book left to listen to, about an hour and a half of listening time. I think it might actually be closer to 3 hours. I don't know. However much time I have left, it's too much time. Will I finish it today? I think it's going to depend on whether it's an hour and a half or 3 hours left. But anyway, I've got some cleaning and stuff to do around the house, so I will probably be listening to it while I do that. So the next time I check in with you will be to give you my review of this book. Okay, I did it. I finished. I'm coming to you with my final thoughts on The Weight of Ink. But before I do that, I'm going to quickly go back and tell you what the book is about. I always forget whether or not I tell you a lot about the book at the beginning. I probably need to organize that better so I remember. But this does mean that I'm not going to have to read any of the other books in the pile, and I'll talk about it at the end of this video, what my plan is to do with those and to do with my self-destruct pile going forward. But for now, let me tell you what this book is about. I don't know what I was about to do with the book. Anyway, I'm going to go through the whole thing as like a little review at the end of this whole vlog is what it turned out to be. So The Weight of Ink, still by Rachel Kadish, I believe I said that at the beginning. It is a slow-paced work of historical fiction and was published in 2017. I did end up listening to the entire thing on audiobook, and it was a good audiobook. I did like it. There were multiple different voice actors or narrators, if you will, which is nice because this book is told from a couple of different points of view, one including a male, so you did have two different female voices as well as one male voice on the audiobook, and I thought that was nice and helped to distinguish between the different characters, and that will become important later on in my review. This book, at the end of the day, is told in two timelines. One is 1660s in London, England, and the other one is the 21st century, also set in England. And it follows primarily the lives of two women trying to live their own truth in a world that is dominated by men. So a pretty popular topic to discuss, but definitely approached in a really interesting and unique way. So in the 1660s, you were following a young woman in a Jewish community in London, England, and in the 21st century, you are following an English woman and her past as well as present in academia, and you are sort of following her at the end of her career. So you also have two very different aged women, as well as women who are living in two different time periods, though they are living in more or less so the same area. The book covers a variety of different topics and discusses things like women in the writing place and women in academia. It also discusses the persecution of Jewish communities in Western Europe from the time of the Inquisition all the way up to and through modern times. And it looks at the roles of women and the choices that they have to navigate and face just to have their voices heard in different time periods. There is also a really interesting side conversation going on in the book about the truth about kindness and what it means to be human. And I also really enjoyed those conversations. The high of this book for me for sure was the characterization of the different people. There's a very large cast of characters and they're all really interested. Like I said, it's told in three different points of view. So you like enough so that you get three different voices, but it's really only two different timelines, if you will, because two of the voices are set in the same timeline. But I think she did a really good job of helping make each person feel distinct and unique and have their own personality and struggles and that kind of thing. However, it is that large cast of characters that ended up being a low for me in the book. And I will say specifically in the audiobook, I'm a very visual learner. And so not being able to see all of these people's names written out, some of the names being very similar because you had people in families, I definitely got confused at different times about who is being referred to, which is unfortunate because there is an unraveling mystery going on throughout this entire book surrounding who people are and their identity and, you know, getting names right and wrong. And listening to this on audiobook made it very difficult for me personally to follow that along. So there were definitely times where there were revelations being made about someone and I wasn't really sure which character it was. And so I did sometimes have to go and find my book and find the passage I was at in the book and look at the actual name to try and help sort it out. but I definitely don't think I experienced as many of the reveals and plot twists as there were, because there were times where I think I was just still confused by that. So personally, I would say if I recommended this book to you, I would recommend reading it physically, but it varies from person to person. I don't listen to a lot of audiobooks, so if you listen to audiobooks regularly, you might not find that to be a barrier. But if I read this book again, I would for sure go into it and keep like a character list, just a simple list of names and who these people are in relation to everybody else. That might be too much work for you. You might not struggle with that, or you might not struggle with it if you read the book physically. Know yourself, basically. I gave this book 4 stars, and I would recommend it, especially for people who like historical fiction that's very informative about a group of people during a certain time period. I learned a lot about Jewish communities in Europe during this time period and how they were and weren't received and what they had to do and not do in various locations in Western Europe just to sort of practice their faith, and how that was accepted or not accepted by various groups and various countries at different times. This is told primarily from the point of view of a young Jewish woman. And so if you're interested in hearing about that and the roles of women in Jewish communities, or the roles of women or lack of roles of women in writing, this would be a book that would also be really good for that. There's also a bit of an element of a mystery trying to be uncovered and discovered. So you do get some sort of archival historical work going on in the book that's kind of fun to follow, and I think is a part of the plot that keeps it going. I did mention in one of my clips that I was really struggling towards the end of the book because I had reached 80% and I couldn't tell like what possibly could be left. I won't say that the last 20% of the book dragged, but I will say I do think it was pulled out longer than it needed to be. I got through it just fine, but there were still a couple of points where I was like, why aren't we done yet? So I wish the last like 20% of the book really had have only been 5% of the book. So however many pages would have needed to be cut for that to work out, I wish had been cut. And yeah, honestly, I just can't say that everything that was in the end of the book was necessary. So it probably is a little bit longer than it needed to be, even if the pacing was still okay through the end. If you liked books like Hamnet or Doomsday Book by Connie Willis, or possibly even Year of Wonders, though I haven't read that, this is definitely going to take place in similar time periods, have similar sort of mysterious things going on and questions, and giving you a flavor of, London during the 1660s plague time, though that happens much later in this book as opposed to being featured in some of the other books. But I did think of the book Hamnet the most frequently while reading this one, so do keep that in mind. And there is a bit of connection between the two that I won't get too into, but certain things do come up over and over again that, really made me think of that book. So that is it for this video. I'm just glad that I finished a book so I don't have to continue diminishing the pile. Whether or not that self-destruct, finish or diminish, decluttering, revisit, whatever the series is going to end up being, is going to look the same next month, I don't know. You'll have to wait and see to find out. Let me know how your reading is going, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye!